So, I've come to a realization while reading this chapter of My Hero Academia, manga chapter 315, that has officially released on Shonen Jump, and that is that All for One is evil and is a piece of shit. And the thing that he did in this chapter just proves how horrible of a person he is. And we're going to talk about it, as well as a few differences between the official and unofficial translations, right after this intro. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Big Blue Drew 97 here, coming at you with another My Hero Academia manga discussion video, this time discussing the differences in translations between manga chapter 315 of the fan translations and the official translations, as well as go into a little bit more about what we actually got in this chapter and the repercussions of that ending, because I'm still pissed about what happened at the end of this chapter, and it mainly pertains to All for One. So we're going to get into that real soon, but before we get into that, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Big Blue Drew 97 if you like this type of content, you like me talking about My Hero Academia, discussing it, doing all that stuff related to My Hero Academia. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload. And without the way, let's get right into the differences between the fan translations and the official translations for My Hero Academia manga chapter 315. So, when it comes to the translations for this week's chapter, there is a few differences. Some of them are a little bit more major, some of them are not, but there are some distinct differences. When it comes to the first few pages, overall, they're pretty much the same, like more or less, from the first from the fan translations to the unofficial translations. Mainly when it pertains to what they're saying, they basically say the same thing at the beginning. Lady Nagant is talking to Overhaul. Overhaul wants to see the boss, and he knows who Deku is. That's all the same. We also get basically the same explanation for both translations about how Lady Nagant, when she's going to use her sniper rifle at like full force, it may jam. That's within both of them, and how they criticize the education system that Deku was a part of. That's all relatively the same. The major difference would be when she's talking about how if a hero messes up and someone dies on their watch, that it's going to mess them up. There is a little bit difference in translations there, but what they say basically comes out to the same thing, as it's going to weigh on their mind if someone dies on their watch if they're a hero. But the main difference that comes in, and it's something that I called when I was going through the translations and my review prior, is that when it comes to her plan is basically the same: shooting at Overhaul, causing Deku to hesitate, and in that moment of hesitation, she is going to shoot him, and then that's going to be the end of it. But what she specifically says is that when this happens, in the fan translations, she says that she's going to kill Deku, but in the official translations through Viz, she says that I'll finish the, most likely meaning she's going to finish the job. So that's something else that is like very important, because it wouldn't make sense for her to want to kill Deku if her job is to bring him in alive. So that was a difference, and I called that in the review, so I knew that that was going to be there. But a major difference between the fan and official translations comes in when it comes to when Deku is slingshotting himself towards Overhaul, which is to the surprise of Lady Nagant. And this is where we get like the info box for Fajin, and this is where a difference between the official and fan translation comes in, because you have the fan translations, which is that you have a quirk Fajin, which is by repeating regular motions, it can store and release kinetic energy. That is what the fan translations say, but the official translations have the quirk Fajin being repeated movements build up motion-based energy for temporary storage and release. And that is actually very interesting and very different when it comes to the translations, because one basically says that he stores up kinetic energy and releases it, while the other one says he stores up motion-based energy, temporarily stores it, and then releases it. And this is very interesting when it comes to that distinction, because I've been going on this slight rant about how you can't really store kinetic energy, you can only convert it into potential energy, and that's basically what the fan translation is saying. But in the official translations, it's basically saying that he's still building up motion-based energy, which you can consider to be kinetic energy, but that he's only storing it temporarily and then he can release it. And that's very like distinct, because it means that if he can store it temporarily means something that is fleeting. It's not going to stay there long, meaning that the energy that he builds up will only remain most likely for a short amount of time. And this is very important, because it means that Fajin as a quirk is not as broken as people may think. People think that he can just store the power up and release it at any time, but based off the official translations, if this is like the case, that it's not something that's permanent but temporary, meaning that if he stores up the energy, if he doesn't use it immediately, then it'll go away. And I think that if we take it at face value, this makes Fajin a less broken and a more balanced quirk that will only be as effective if it was with one for all, because not only is Deku able to store up more power because it's been powered up and making it stronger, but there's also a possibility that he can have it longer because it's a part of One for All instead of it being its own separate quirk. So that's a really important distinction, because it shows that Fajin may not be as broken as we perceive it to be, because it only like temporarily stores it. Now, if later on we get the reveal that, oh yeah, he's able to keep that energy stored in his body for like 100 years, that's not going to be the case. But if it's like longer than maybe like a day or 2 days, then I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of a little bit broken. But I feel as if like they said, oh yeah, he can only hold it in his body temporarily for like a minute or even like 5 minutes or even an hour, I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's more restrictive, showing that Fajin isn't broken. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when it comes to Fajin and his other quirks. I may do that in a different video, but I want to dive a little bit more when it comes to his quirks, and how when it comes to his quirks, they're not really that strong, but they're only as strong as we perceive them to be, because they are a part of One for All. So yeah, that's one major difference between the fan translations and the official translations when it comes to this chapter of My Hero Academia. But then you also have like a slight differences when it comes to the naming schemes of Deku's moves, where when he talks about how he's using 45% all for one, how he's using the centrifugal force of him swinging his body forward, and how he's able to use like the energy that he stored in his body through Fajin to basically propel himself forward, to give him in the unofficial fan translations, he calls it pseudo 100%, but in the official translations it's called faux 100%, which the difference is just how it looks and how it's actually named, so it's not that big of a deal. And the same can be said about when he uses faux 100% Manchester Smash in the official translations, while he uses a pseudo 100% Manchester Smash in the fan translations. So that's not really that big of a difference between the fan and official translations. But one big difference I really want to go to pertains to the dialogue that we see when someone is talking about how Deku is using all of his quirks at once, and how by doing so it's halted or slowed down his movements. And this is a very important distinction that the fan translations may have gotten completely wrong, and the official translations may have gotten absolutely right. So when it comes to the differences between the fan translations and the official chapter, when it comes to this page, I really want to bring up the difference when it comes to the page where we see the third user, because this is where a major distinction comes in. Because in the fan translations, what is being said, which is basically that Deku had used all of these quirks in succession, and because of that, his processing speed couldn't keep up and he halted, and how we have this perspective of being said by the third user, and how he also perceived to say that because of what happened there, Deku learned how to use 3 quirks at the same time, more or less, instead of going through succession, so his processing speed isn't halted, as well as the fact that he had some Fajin stored up in his leg. From what we get with the fan translations, all that dialogue, all that was being said was coming from the third user's thoughts. But in the official translations, it doesn't say that it's coming from the third user. We see the third user in the background looking at Deku, but all the dialogue that is said when someone brings up the idea of using the 5-6 quirks at once, and how that person froze up, and how they learned to use only 3 of them on the second time, and how they have Fajin stored up, that is all coming from the perspective of Deku. And it's pretty much saying that Deku's the one who thought about this. He realized that using all of the quirks in succession made him freeze up, so instead he's decided to only focus on 3, and that he's able to do all of this knowing that he has Fajin stored up in his leg. And I think that that is a very important distinction when it comes to translation, because first of all, one of them is implying that the third user thought about all of this, and in actuality, I think that may be a bad idea for it to be like written in that way, mainly because it means that he's the one. Well, it kind of comes off the same way in both the unofficial and official translations, but I think I may prefer the fan translation less and prefer the official translation more, because it means that all of this is what's going on is all due to Deku. He's the one who realizes this instead of someone else realizing it. He comes to his own conclusions about what he needs to do, and that all that happens was all due to his own planning. While with the fan translations, it's all in the thought process of the third user, and he's being very observant, which could give him more characterization of him in that scene. But I think that same characterization can come from the official translations because we see him in the background, and this makes sense because when it comes to the users of One for All, they said that they won't get involved and that they'll let Deku have his privacy. But the fact that we see him there, he may be observing Deku, and he may also get the same thought process of, okay, he's doing all of this, but he doesn't specifically say it. He's just staying back, he's looking at it, and maybe this is going to be like a moment that's going to be called back to when the third user places more trust in Deku. He's like, okay, yeah, I was watching you, kid. You realized your faults, and you immediately compensated for them in the right moment within a few seconds. That's really amazing. I support you. So that's kind of the reason why I prefer the official, because it shows that Deku's actually intelligent, he's actually using strategy, he's actually learning how to use his quirks and learning what he needs to do at his level right now to be effective. And what is even more amazing is that the third user is looking at all of this and is not saying nothing and is just observing, as all the other previous users said that they were just going to do. They'll give advice every so often, but they're just going to be bystanders and allow Deku to take the reins, which is important coming from the third user who didn't have trust in Deku in the first place. But the fact that he's standing back and not saying anything shows that he may be getting more accustomed to trusting Deku and his actions, and that he may begin to believe in him. So yeah, that's pretty much when it comes to all of like the difference in translations when it comes to the fan translations and the official translations. And there are obviously like differences between like actual dialogue used, but they pretty much convey the exact same thing. So from here on, I'm gonna get probably more into like the greater gist of this discussion, particularly when it comes to the end of this chapter, which if you haven't read it, spoilers, All For One blows up Lady Nagant. And it's funny because there's probably going to be arguments about how All For One actually did this. Does he have a specific type of quirk that allows a person to blow up? That seems weird if that's the case. Actually, it's not. We actually do have a character in the X-Men who has the ability to blow himself up, and his name is Bailey Hoskins. His ability in X-Men is to literally blow himself up once, but he cannot regenerate from it, so it's actually a horrible quirk. So he could have potentially gave her a quirk like that, that if she fails a mission, that it just blows her up. Or he's Killer Queen. And no, not that Killer Queen, that Killer Queen. Yeah, Bites the Duster Killer Queen, where he could detonate her from a distance, which would also imply how could he detonate her at a distance. To my explanation is that it's All For One. He probably has a quirk for that. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that he was able to do that to Lady Nagant. But Also, what is also very interesting about All For One that makes me hate him even more is that he's a victim blamer. He blames the victim because in the last page of this chapter, we basically get All For One after, you know, he made Lady Nagant explode because she was beginning to change sides. He just basically says, "Oh man, you were just a tool. If you're gonna blame anything for where you are right now, don't blame me. Don't blame Hero Society. Just blame your blessed quirk that you were born with. Just blame yourself with being born the way you are. You are just so hapless, woeful, Lady Nagant." He's a victim blamer. So if you didn't hate him more now, he literally blames Lady Nagant for everything that went wrong with her, even though her goals is like, oh yeah, Hero Society is corrupt, and All For One's like, oh yeah, totally, yeah, Hero Society, yeah, it's all messed up. Yeah, the reason why you're here is all because of Hero Society, and then in the background he's like, actually no, it's because you have a good quirk. Oh, gosh, you're a horrible person. But let's get into like the real gist of why we are in this last page. Hawks is back. I'm not surprised that he's back. He has his wings, which, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know why so many people are surprised about that. Like, Hawks is probably taking inspiration from Angel. You know, that X-Men character with wings that eventually turned into Archangel with metal wings. But for some apparent reason, when he stopped being Archangel and went back to Angel, his metal wings just fell off and his new angel wings that he had prior came back. That Angel? Yeah. Comics are weird. But yeah, if you kind of knew that when it comes to like the aesthetics of Hawks' wings, you could have like probably predicted and most likely remember that if he takes inspiration potentially from Angel, that his wings would eventually grow back. And like I said, literally Angel's wings were like basically ripped out of his back and replaced with metal ones, but yet his wings like came back, and not like over time, like no, they just came out of his back. So I'm not surprised that Hawks has his wings, especially since we do have that panel, I think in chapter 306, where we actually see like little like nubs on his back. And like at first, like people could have like thought that, oh yeah, that means that his wings weren't coming back. But for me, because we saw like the fact that it was focused on his back and that we saw something protruding from it, I expected like, okay, maybe that's meaning that he's going to get his wings back. So yeah, he does have his wings. Also, it just makes just as much sense for why he would still be around Endeavor and Best Genius and not just with them if he didn't have a quirk, because it would just put himself in danger. It just makes sense that he would at least have some of his feathers back. So yeah, Hawks is back. He has his feathers. He saves Lady Nagant as he's basically asking her to not die on him, which I guess that can imply that Lady Nagant is still alive. If I could remember a character, Night Eye, that was still alive as soon as someone caught them and then immediately died in the hospital, I would say that she's dead. But, we just don't know. Because I think that's more or less a 50-50 coin toss on whether or not Lady Nagant at this moment is dead or alive. I can see that she could be dead. I can see that she could be alive. We have seen characters take explosions to the face, Deku, and still survive. Also, Bakugo, Endeavor. A lot of people actually have taken explosions to the face and survived. Anytime Bakugo really hits anyone. Yeah. So yeah, explosions really aren't that deadly. Now, if Lady Nagant were to fall on a spike, oh no, she's straight up dead. Or potentially like Conference, taking a chunk out of her own body, potentially dead. But even then, probably still alive. So the fact that it's still in this like area of limbo, it's very interesting to discuss about, because we can talk about how this is going to affect the characters moving forward, and particularly Deku, because he was literally there. He literally caught Lady Nagant before she failed, thinking that he saved her, and then All For One blew her up. So there are two ways that you can take this moment. We can take that Hawks tries to save her, she eventually heals up and eventually becomes an ally. But because Deku basically like broke her like sniper rifle arm, we can assume that it can probably grow back and repair itself, so she could be a potential ally in the future. That's also a possibility that she gets fully healed, everything's kosher, she becomes one of the good guys once again, and Deku used Talk no Jutsu and it was successful. A second option, and now I think there are actually three options, is that it does heavy damage to her, to the point where it incapacitates her for the rest of the series, but she'll eventually come back to a brand new rebuilt hero society that fits her perspective of what she thought hero society should be. It's not tinted anymore, everything is more in the open, and that Deku basically sort of kind of helped build this hero society where she can think about like, oh wow, I guess that kid actually did it. I'm very impressed. And that's not going to like weigh on Deku's mind as much as if she was dead. He's still going to feel guilty about the fact that he may have been directly involved in the fact that Lady Nagant was put into a coma and was heavily damaged, but it's not going to be as weighty as if he thinks that she is dead, which is the third option I want to bring up, is that Lady Nagant actually being dead. In the same vein as like Night Eye being dead, Uraraka tried to save a Night Eye and failed. He just died because of his injuries. The same can go for Lady Nagant. Deku tries to save Lady Nagant, Hawks catches her, they rush her to the hospital, and she dies in the hospital from her injuries. And that is something, as she said in this chapter, is going to weigh heavily on Deku's mind because someone died on his watch and he was unable to save her. So that may be something that's going to keep him up at night, you know, besides the fact that he's always up at night trying to stop villains. So if anything, that's going to lead to another like piece of character growth for Deku, or even more importantly, this could be foreshadowing to another person's death that's going to weigh heavily on Deku's mind and may begin to alter his perspective on how he defeats All For One in Shigaraki. And if you've been watching my videos long enough, you know where I'm going with this. All Might! This could be foreshadowing to All Might's death. The fact that Lady Nagant brings up the idea that weighing heavily on the mind if you're unable to save someone, this could be foreshadowing to Deku being in a situation where he tries to save All Might and he fails because All Might like literally sacrifices himself for Deku, which ties into what he said 2 chapters ago. And this could be like the building blocks for that moment. And as I've said in a few videos prior, that this could also be the build up to Deku fully learning and unlocking One for All at 100% if All Might were to die. So this could just be foreshadowing, building the building blocks to that moment by having it either weigh on his head now, or potentially having death being something that's going to weigh on Deku's mind later on in the future, and that it's just brought up now just to solidify that this is going to be a plot point moving forward. If not for Lady Nagant, for another character in the future, similar to Uraraka when it comes to the death that Night Eye had on her, and how it kind of like changed her perspective of wanting to be a hero for money to wanting to be a hero to save people. And this could change Deku's perspective of fighting off the villains and understanding their perspective to potentially having to kill a villain because their actions are too unredeemable. Oh yeah, also you have Chisake, who's also here just doing nothing as Deku saved him. So Deku's most likely going to talk to Overhaul as well. Chisake, maybe. I don't know. Does anybody really care about Chisake now? I mean, he was cool in his like the 7 Precepts arc, but now he's just a whiny baby. Oh well, we'll get something with him later on. But yeah, that's all I really want to talk about when it comes to this discussion for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 315. And I'll just give you the question. Do you think that Lady Nagant is dead? Do you think that she's alive? Do you think that she'll survive? Or do you think that she's going to... Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. As well as subscribe to my YouTube channel, leave a like on this video if you liked it, hit that notification bell to be notified from whenever I upload more content. And without the way, hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!